We're here to report the extinguishment of obligation by payments or performance. These are the contents of the obligations, general provision of obligations, sources of obligations, natures and effect of obligations, different kinds of obligations, extinguishment of obligations. This is what we will discuss. Let's start our discussion. Payments or performance. When we heard the words payments, what first comes to our mind? Of course, first that comes to our mind, it is fees. When we say performance, it is a process of carrying out or accomplishing an action. Let's proceed to Article 1232. Payments means not only the delivery of money, but also the performance in any other manner of an obligation. This article manifested that the different way of payments of an obligation is through delivery of money or performance of obligation in any manner. Example, if Mercy is obligated to give Talita as a specific car, payment is made by delivering the car. Article 1233, a debt not be understood to have been paid unless the things or service in which the obligation consists has been completely delivered or rendered as the case may be. A debt may refer to an obligation to deliver money, to deliver a thing other than money, to do an act or not to do an act. It must be on the currency agreed on and in the time and place stipulated. The things delivered or service rendered must be exactly that which was the object of negotiation. Example, Jason promised to pay 1,500 to Nico for a ukulele. Jason is only giving 1,000 to Nico. Nico can refuse to accept the 1,000 because the fulfillment is not complete. Article 1234, if the obligation has been substantially performed in good faith, the obligor may recover as due there had been and strict and complete fulfillment, less damages suffered by the obliged. There is substantial compliance by the debtor when in good faith he has attempted to perform to contract or prestation, but through excusable neglect or oversight he failed to make full and complete performance for which the other party may be indemnified. If there is substantial compliance, the obligor may recover as due there has been complete fulfillment minus the amount of damages suffered by the obliged. Example, Serapin obliges himself to sell 1,000 bags of cement to Bert for a certain price. However, despite diligent effort on his part, Serapin was able to deliver only 950 bags. Because of the cement shortage, Serapin wants to comply with his obligation to deliver the entire obligation, but he could not do so for reasons beyond his control. Under the law, Serapin can recover as due there had been complete delivery less the price of the 50 bags. Bert cannot require Serapin to deliver first the remaining 50 bags as a condition to his liability for the price. He must pay for the 950 bags and enforce his right for damages for failure and Serapin to deliver the difference. It is the incumbent upon Serapin, however, to explain satisfactorily his failure to make complete delivery. Article 1235. When the obliged accept the performance, knowing its incompleteness or irregularity, and without expressing any protest of objection, the obligation is deemed fully complied with. Note, in case of acceptance, the law considered that the creditors waive his right under the principle of estoppel. The whole obligation is extinguished. Article 1235 requisite. The obliged knows that the performance is incomplete or irregular. Note, if payment is incomplete, irregular, the creditors may properly reject it. Number 2, he accepts the performance without expressing any protest of objection. Note, mere receipt of partial payment is not equivalent to acceptance of the performance by the creditors. Forms of protest. Form of protest, no particular manner or time required for protest or objection, so long as the acts of the creditors events that she is not satisfied to debtor payments performance, the obligation shall not be deemed extinguished. Example, A availed of these services to stencil the name of his business on 3,000 pieces of rosary for donation using in particular font size. B delivers the 3,000 pieces of rosary with the stencil of each but using different font style. A received the rosaries and distributed them to the donees. Obligation is extinguished. A availed of C services to renovate his house for the purpose of making it soundproof. B renovate the house but the soundproofing was not effective. Texted B that he is not satisfied with the latter's work. Obligation is not fully extinguished. Article 1236, the creditors is not bound to accept payments of performance by a third person who has no interest in the fulfillment of the obligation, unless there is a stipulation to the contrary. Whoever pays for another may demand from the debtor what he has paid, except that if he paid without the knowledge or against the will of the debtor, he can recover only insofar as the payment has been beneficial to the debtor. Article 1237, whoever pays on behalf of the debtor without the knowledge or against the will of the latter cannot compel the mortgage, guarantee, or penalty. When he regains capacity or by the latter's representative during the time of incapacity of the creditors. Inversely, in the incapacitated creditor has kept the things delivered or he benefited from the payments and received, the debtor is released from the obligation by the virtue of payment. During the creditors is incapacitated and to cannot administer his own property should be given to this legal representative. If there is none, the debtor may consign the things in the court. Meaning of subrogation, the substitution of one for rights in law. In subrogation, the person who pays for another acquires not only the rights to be reimbursed for what he has paid, but also the other rights attached to the obligation originally contracted by the debtor. Example, Canoto mortgaged his property to Celso in the amount of 2,000. Alfredo, third person, pays the whole debt and Canoto to Celso without the knowledge of Canoto. He then asked that Celso assign to him Alfredo the former's right as mortgage. If Celso refuse, can Alfredo compel him? No, under Article 1237, but if Celso wants to make the assignment, then Alfredo can be subrogated to Celso write the mortgage. Article 1238. Payments made by the third person who does not intend to be reimbursed by the debtor is deemed to be donations which requires the debtor consent, but the payment is in any case valid to the creditors who has accepted it. Article 1238. Payments made by the third person who does not intend to be reimbursed by the debtor is deemed to be donation, which required the debtor consents, but the payment is in any case valid as the creditors who has accepted it. Example, Chris borrowed from Gretchen 1,000. Bimbi is the guarantor. Without the knowledge of consent of Chris, Penoy paid Gretchen 1,000. Example, Cardo owes Aliano 1,000 without the intention of being reimbursed. Nena paid Cardo's obligation. Cardo has previously accepted Nina's generosity. In this case, Cardo is not liable to Nena, and his obligation to Aliana is extinguished. But if Cardo did not consent to the donation, Nena may recover from Cardo since there has been no donation, although originally Cardo did not intend to be reimbursed. Nevertheless, the obligation of Cardo to Aliana is extinguished because the payment is valid as to Aliana who has accepted it. Article 1239. In obligation to give payment made by the one who does not have the predisposal of the things due and capacity to alienate it shall not be valid without prejudice to the provision or Article 14.27 under the title on natural. 1239. These articles deals with obligation to give. The payer must have the predisposal of the things paid, otherwise the payment is not valid. Payer who does not have the capacity to alienate the things, such as when he is non-composed mentis, not of a sound mind, the payment is not valid and it can be annulled unless it is made by minors under the Article 1427, which states that money or fungible goods delivered by a minor can no longer be recovered if they have been consumed by the creditors in good faith. Article 1240. Payment shall be made to the person in whose favor the obligation has been constituted, or his successor in interest, or any person authorized to receive it. To whom payment must be made? To the person in whose favor the obligation has been constituted, the creditors. B. The successor and interest like the heirs, or to any person authorized to receive it. Article 1241. Payments to a person who is incapacitated to administer his property shall be valid if he has kept the things delivered or insofar as the payment has been beneficial to him. If the payments made the incapacitated creditors who cannot administer his property did not benefit him, or he has not kept the things delivered, the debtor may be compelled by the creditors to pay anew. Payments made the incapacitated creditors effect. If the payments made the incapacitated creditors who cannot administer his property did not benefit him or he has not kept the things delivered, the debtor may be compelled by the creditors to pay anew when the regains capacity, or by the latter's representative during the time of the incapacity of the creditors. Inversely, if the incapacitated creditor has kept the things delivered or the benefited from the payment he received, the debtor is released from his obligation by virtue of payment. During the creditor is incapacitated and to cannot administer his own property should be given to his legal representative if there is one of the debtor may consign the things in the court. Thank you.
This is the continuation of the extinguishment of obligation by payment or performance. Article 1242. Payment made in good faith to any person in possession of the credit shall release the debtor. This article is intended to protect the debtor from being required to payment has already been paid by mistake. We have here an example. Nico owes Hezekiah 100. Hezekiah lost the promissory note given by Nico. Nanay found the promissory note and demand payment from Nico. Possessions of credit does not refer to the real creditor of his heirs, of the person authorized, or the person authorized by him or by self by law under Article 1240. It refers to the person who has the appearance of the creditor but who actually is not. Document evidencing the credit is the credit itself. Let's proceed to the Article 1243. Payment made the creditor by debtor after the latter has been judicially ordered to retain the debt shall not be valid. Here are the instances. First, garnishment, the proceeding by which a debtor's creditor is subjected to the payment of his own debt to another. Second, interpleader. It is the technical name of the action in which a certain person in possession of certain property wants claimants to litigate among themselves for the same. And the third, injunction. It is the judicial process by virtue of which a person is generally ordered to refrain from doing something. Article 1244. The debtor of a thing cannot compel the creditor to receive a different one, although the latter may be of the same values as or more valuable than that which is due. In obligation to do or not to do, an action of or forbearance cannot be substituted by another act or forbearance against the obligee's will. The substitution of prestation, debtor cannot compel creditor to receive a different one. And the second, upon agreement consent of creditor, debtor may deliver a different thing or perform a different presentation. And the third, there are arbitration in payment or novation. The Dation, delivery, the transmission of ownership of a thing by the debtor to the creditor as accepted equivalent of the performance obligation, while the novation, extinguishment of an obligation by the substitution, change of obligation by a subsequent one which extinguishes modifies the first. Note: forbearance in the action of refraining from exercising a legal right, especially enforcing the payment of the debt. And the article for 1245, dation in payment whereby property is alienated to the creditor in satisfaction of debt in money shall be governed by the law of sales. Here are the concept of dation. Payment is delivery and transmission of ownership of a thing by the debtor to the creditor as an accepted equivalent of the performance of obligation, and the second, modern concept of dation in payment considers it is a novation by change of object. Article 1246. when the obligation consists in a delivery of an indeterminate or generic thing whose quality and circumstances have not been stated. The creditor cannot demand a thing of superior quality, neither can the debtor deliver a thing of inferior quality. The purpose of the obligation and other circumstances shall be taken into consideration. We have here an example. A promised to deliver to B a horse. B cannot compel A to deliver a prize-winning racehorse. Neither can A require to accept an old sickly horse. Rule of the medium quality. If an obligation consists in the delivery of a specific thing, the very thing due must be delivered. If there is a disagreement between parties, the law steps in and determines whether the contract has been compelled with or not according to the circumstances. The benefit of this article may be waived by the creditor by accepting a thing of inferior quality, by the debtor by delivering of superior quality. Article 1247. Unless it is otherwise stipulated and extrajudicial expenses required by the payment shall be for the account of the debtor. With regard to judicial cost, the rules of court shall govern. The general rule here, the debtor has to pay for the extrajudicial expenses incurred during the payment. It is the debtor who benefits primarily since his obligation is thus extinguishment. Ex- Exception when there is stipulation to the contrary. Debtor pays for the extrajudicial expenses. The extrajudicial expenses of payment are for the account of the debtor. The reason is that the obligation extinguished when payment is made and it is therefore the debtor who is primarily benefited. It is if the parties have made the stipulation as to the who bear the expenses, then their stipulation shall be followed. Article 1247 does not to apply to expenses incurred by the creditor in doing the debtor domicile to collect. Article 1248. Unless there is an express stipulation to that effect, the creditor cannot be compelled partially to receive the prestations in which the obligation consists. Neither may the debtor be required to make partial payment. However, when the debt is in part liquidated and in part unliquidated, the creditor may demand and the debtor may effect the payment of the former without waiting for the liquidation of the latter.
Article 1249. The payment of debts in money shall be within the RNC stipulated, and if it is not possible to deliver such RNC, then the RNC is legal tender in the Philippines. The delivery of promissory notes, payable order, or bills of exchange or other mercantile documents shall produce the effect of payment only when they have been trust, or when through the fault of the creditor they have been impaired. In the meantime, the action derived from the original obligation shall be held in the abeyance. Article 1 to 50. In case Article 1 to 50. In case an extraordinary inflation or depletion of the currency stipulated should supervene, the value of the currency at the time of the establishment of the obligation shall be the basis of payment, unless there is an agreement to the contrary. Meaning of inflation and deflation. Number 1. Inflation is a sharp, sudden increase of money or credit or both without a corresponding increase in business transaction. Inflation causes a drop in the value of money, resulting in the rise of the general price level. Number 2. Deflation is the reduction in volume and circulation of the available money or credit, resulting in a decline of the general price level. It is the opposite of inflation. Example, D borrowed from C 5,000 pesos payable after 5 years on the maturity of the obligation. The value of 5,000 pesos dropped to 2,500 pesos because of inflation or increased to the 10,000 pesos because of deflation. In this case, assuming there is extraordinary inflation or deflation, the basis of payment shall be the equivalent value of the RC today to that 5 years ago. Hence, D is liable to pay B 10,000 pesos or 2,500 pesos unless there is an agreement to the contrary. Example, that D shall pay C 5,000 pesos regardless of any extraordinary decrease or increase in the purchasing power of the peso. Note, the provision of Article 1250 requires for its application a declaration of inflation or deflation with the central bank. Without such declaration, creditors cannot demand an increase, and debtors a decrease of what is due to or from them. Article 1251. Payment shall be made in the place designated in the obligation, there being no express stipulation, and if the undertaking is to deliver a determinate thing, the payment shall be made wherever the might be at the moment the obligation was constituted. In any other case, the place of payment shall be domicile of the debtor. If the debtor changes his domicile in bad faith or after he has incurred in delay, the additional expenses shall be borne by him. These provisions are without prejudice to being under the rules of the court. Example, might beyond oblige himself to deliver to constitute a specific pack of noodle. It was agreed that the noodle shall be delivered at constitute's house. The house of constitute shall be the place of delivery. Subsection 1. Application of payments. Article 152. He who has various debts of the same kind in favor of one and the same creditor may declare at the time of making the payment to which of them the same must be applied, unless the parties so stipulate, or when the application of payment is made by the party for whose benefit the term has been constituted. Application shall not be made as to debts which are not yet due. If the debtor accepts from the creditor a receipt in which an application of the payment is made, the former cannot complain of the same unless there is cause for invalidating the contract. Application of payment. Application of payments is the designation of the debt to which should be applied the payment made by a debtor who has various debts of the same kind in favor of one and the same debtor. Requisite requisite of application of payments. The requisite are: number one, there must be one debtor and one creditor. Number two, there must be two or more debts of the same kind. Number three, all of the debts must be due. And number four, the amount paid by the debtor must not be sufficient to cover the total amount of all the debts. Article 1253. The debts will use interest payment of the principal shall not be deemed to have been made until the interest have been over. Article 154. When the payment cannot be applied to accordance in accordance with the preceding rules, or if application cannot be inferred from other circumstances, the debt which is most one rules to the debtor. Among those due shall be deemed to have been satisfied. If the debts due are of the same nature and burden, the payment shall be applied to all of them proportionately. Subsection 2. Payment by cession. Article 1255. The debtor may decede or assign his property to his creditors in payment of his debts. The cession, unless there is stipulation of to the contrary, shall only release the debtor from responsibility or the net proceeds of the thing assigned. The agreements which on the effect of the cession are made between the debtor and his creditors shall be governed by special laws. Payment by cession is another special form of payment. It is the assignment of abandonment of all the properties of the debtor for the benefit of his creditors in order that the latter may sell the same and apply to proceed the proceeds thereof to the satisfaction of their credits. Requisites of payment by cession. There must be two or more creditors. The debtor must be partially insolvent. There must be an acceptance of the cession by the creditors.
Good day, ma'am. This is Mercy Deline. Our report is all about extinguishment of obligations under the special forms of payment. Applications of payment, dation in payment, payment by cession, tender of payment, and consignation. Under the subsection 1, application of payments for Article 1252. He who has various debts of the same kind in favor of one of the same creditor may declare at the time of making the payment to which of them same must be applied, unless the parties so stipulate, or when the application of payment is made by the party whose benefit the term has been constituted. Application shall not be made as to debts which are not yet due. If the debtor accepts from the creditor a receipt in which of an application the payment is made, the former cannot complain of the same unless there is a cause for invalidating the contract. Meaning of applications of payments. Now, application is the designation of debt to which should be applied the payment by the debtor was various debts of the same kind in favor of one and the same creditor. The requisites of application payments are there must be one debtor and one creditor. There must be two or more debts of the same kind. All of debts must be due, and the amount paid by the debtor must not be sufficient to cover the total amount of the all debts. Under the Article 1253, if the debt produces interest, payment of the principal shall not be deemed to have been made until the interest have been covered. And another is the Article 1254. When the payment cannot be applied in accordance with the preceding rules or the application cannot be inferred from other circumstances, the debt which is not most onerous to the debtor among those due shall be deemed have been satisfied. If debts due are the same nature and burden, the payment shall be applied to all the proportionately. And for the subsection 2, payment by cession, under the Article 1255, the debtor may cede or assign his property to his creditors in payment of his debts. This cession, unless there is a stipulation to the contrary, shall only release the debtor from responsibility for the net proceeds of the thing assigned. The agreements which, on the effect of the cession, are made between the debtor and his creditors and governed by special laws. Payment by cession is another special form of payment. It is the assignment or abandonment of all the properties of the debtor for the benefit of his creditors in order that the latter shall sell the same and apply the proceeds thereof to satisfaction of the creditors of their credits. Requisites of payment by cession. There must be two or more creditors. The debtor must be partially insolvent. There must be an acceptance by cession by the creditor. Subsection 3, tender of payment and consignation. Under the Article 1252, if the creditor to whom tendered of payment has been made refuses without just cause to accept it, the debtor shall be released from responsibility by the consignation of the thing or sum due. Consignation alone shall produce the same effect in the following cases: when the debtor is absent or unknown or does not appear at the place of payment, when he is incapacitated to receive the payment at the time it is due, when without just cause he refuses to give a receipt, when two or more persons claim the same right to collect, when the title of the obligation has been lost. Tender of payment is the definitive act of offering the creditor is due him or her together with the demand that the creditor accept the same. For consignation is the act of depositing the due with the court of judicial authorities whenever the creditor cannot accept or refuses to accept payment and generally requires a prior tender of payment. No, tender is the antecedent of consignation that is an act preparatory to the consignation, which is principal and from which are derived the immediate consequences which the debtor desires or seeks to obtain. Tender of payment may be extrajudicial, while consignation is necessarily judicial. Under the Article 1257, in order that the consignation of thing you may release the obligor, it must first be announced to the person's interest in the fulfillment of the obligation. The consignation shall be ineffectual if it is not made strictly consonance with the provision which regulate the payment. Under the Article 1258, consignation shall be made by depositing the things due to disposal of the judicial authority before whom the tender of payment shall be proved in a proper case, and the announcement of the consignation in other cases, the consignation having been made, the party shall be also notified thereof. The rationale for consignation is to avoid the performance of obligation becoming more onerous to the debtor by reason of causes not imputable to him. Other article is the under Article 1259. The expenses of consignation when properly made shall be charged against the creditor. The general rule is that the creditor will bear the expenses of consignation because consignation of the obligation had been made because of the creditor whom tendered of payment was made to refuse to accept it is without just cause. Article 1260. Once the consignation has been duly made, the debtor may ask the judge to order the cancellation of the obligation before the creditor has accepted the consignation or before the judicial declaration that the consignation has been properly made. The debtor may withdraw the thing or the sum deposited, allowing the obligation to remain in force. Article 1261. If the consignation having been made, the creditor should authorize the debtor to withdraw the same. He shall lose every preferences which he may have over thing. The co-debtors, guarantors, and sureties shall be released. Section 2. Loss of the thing due. Under Article 1262, an obligation which consists in the delivery of a determinate thing shall be extinguished if should be lost or destroyed without the fault of the debtor, and before he has incurred in delay, when by law or stipulation the obligor is liable even if the fortuitous events, the loss of the thing does not extinguish the obligation, and he shall be responsible for damages. The same rule applies when the nature of the obligation requires the assumption of risk. General rule: the obligation to deliver a determinate thing is extinguished if it should be lost or destroyed. Requisites in order that the obligation to give determined thing will be extinguished. The obligation is to deliver a determinate thing. The thing is lost without the fault of the debtor, and the thing is lost before the debtor has incurred in delay. The other exceptions are when the law is so provides, when the stipulation so provides, when the nature of obligation requires the assumption of risk, when the loss of the things occurs when the fault of the debtor.
Article 1263. In an obligation to deliver a generic thing, the loss or destruction of anything of the same kind does not extinguish the obligation. Article 1264. The court shall determine whether, under the circumstance, the partial loss of the object of the obligation is so important as to extinguish the obligation. Article 1265. Whenever the thing is lost in the possession of the debtor, it shall be presumed that the loss was due to his fault, unless there is proof to the contrary and without prejudice to the provisions of Article 1165. This presumption does not apply in case of earthquake, flood, storm, or other natural calamity. Article 1266. The debtor in obligation to do shall also be released when the prestation become legally or physically impossible without the fault of the obligor. Article 1267. When the service has become so difficult as to be manifestly beyond the contemplation of the parties, the obligor may also be released therefrom in whole or in part. Article 1268. When the debt of a thing certain and determinate proceeds from a criminal offense, the debtor shall not be exempted from the payment of each price, whatever may be the cause of the loss, unless the thing having been offered by him to the person who should receive it, the latter refuse without justification to accept it. Article 1269. The obligation having been extinguished by the loss of the thing, the creditor shall have all the rights of action which the debtor may have against third persons by reason of the loss.